Big flash there. Alright, so that is all together right there. The last little thing that I need to do is put some more moly grease on here where the shift fork slides in between these gears here. But everything is done on this page, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn the page. I'll worry about that here when I put it back together, or when I get to that point. So page A3, what do we got here? Well, I'm assuming that's a ball bearing. Alright, well, we'll get this little counter shaft hooked up with these idler gears or whatever. Looks like we got a rod, C-clip, washer, bearing, another C-clip, some sort of pin here that's sliding down the middle of that shaft. That might be a threaded rod, because there is a threaded rod in this package here. And that, I'm sure, this is probably going out to the spur gear. So that is probably what the spur gear attaches to, I'm thinking. Just guessing. Alright, so I'm going to start putting this little mess here together and move on to my next step. Thread lock. That's where they want you to use a red thread lock. Alright, I'll probably use red there, I'd imagine. I know if you go red, you're going to be dead, but I'm thinking that's for the spur gear, so I might want to go red on that, I guess. And I left a part out. A3, so I'm assuming it's A13 is the bag that we need, with the shafts and the bearings and a couple screws in there and whatnot. Shift fork in here, because that'll be on the next page with the shift fork assembly. Alright, so let me crack this baby open and start assembling this stuff. Like I said, I'm sorry guys, I wish I had something to hold the camera with. And we're back again. Well, you know, I'm looking for the rod for these here gears to sit on, and they're not in the bag that they're telling me to go to, but they are back into this bag, which is the one that had the rest of the gears in it. And that's probably the spacer and everything else too, so even though it says we're on page A3 here, there is, like I said, they need to do some better labeling on this stuff, take out some of the guesswork. I mean, I'm able to figure it out okay, but a little tougher when you're bouncing back and forth between the camera and everything else, but nevertheless, poor labeling. Poor labeling. And this is just something I wanted to point out. I had to go back to the original parts bag for these C-clips. And this last washer that I was kind of wondering about, that needs to go on too. And then this little pin here, that needs to be installed as well as that threaded rod. So there's where our washer is going to go, in between the C-clip and this bearing here on the end. And then our little pin's going to be installed, which is, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there is a little hole in the drive shaft right there. That's where that pin's going to be installed. And then there's looks like another C-clip that goes on after you start installing these gears, and that spacer and the other bearing. But yeah, like I said, there's no mention or reference to that parts bag. I mean, what do you see on this for parts needed? 2 bearings. There's nothing else telling you that you need all this other stuff. Transmission assembly. Go over here to the next page. There's nothing here other than showing you that it's the shift fork assembly. But there's no, you know, descriptions on what all you're going to need. Like on page 1, you know, it says A1, but it's telling you that, okay, you need 2 or 1 of these screws and 1 of these screws and 1 of those nuts and 2 of those nuts. Go around to this side, you know, they show you got all these gears here. No real description on that. Show you your bearings. Yeah, you need 4 of these and 2 of these. But you get to this page and what? They just show you bearings. They don't show you anything else or what bags to find these out of, other than it says A3 on it. And these bags are all A1, A1, 2, A1, 3. I think I was sitting around here somewhere. Here's another just straight up A2. But this one had no label on it. This bag had no label on it. That's all I'm saying. They could be a little bit better with their whole, you know, instructions on how to put everything together. I mean, like I said, I'll have no problem putting this together. It's not going to faze me a bit, but just for other people or whatever, I think it would be a little bit easier. You know, just for a beginner or somebody who's putting a car together for the first time, it'd be a lot easier if they had a better description and better layout with all their stuff. Alright, bad glare again. Alright, so I'm at the point here where I was putting this Allen set screw into the end of the shaft here. They don't really tell you how tight to tighten it down. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it's kind of for the spur gear. You know, I did bottom it out into the shaft where it's supposed to be, I'd imagine. And there's like really nothing to hold onto the rod with or anything, so I wanted to make sure I didn't scratch this up. There is a flat spot on this rod. So I just wrapped some cardboard around it and then just kind of lightly gripped it with the old Robo grips there, just so I wasn't going to scar it up or anything. And then just snugged that thing down a little bit, just kind of gave a little extra twist on it, more than I could put on with just holding it with my hands. Not so much that it's never going to come back out again, but I did snug it down a little bit, just FYI. And you guys are just going to keep getting flashed. Try to move it over from the cardboard over to here first. Alright, so this is the next step. I'm going to put this washer and bearing on last. So I put in a little hairpin, or a little steel pin through the shaft here. I slid on the smaller idler gear, or fatter idler gear, and then the other next one to go in after that. And now I have to snap on one more C-clip right there on that little ring on the inside, just right next to the gear. It's probably not going to focus on it, but it's right snug with the side of the gear here. So, and then after that, slip on this little spacer and another bearing. I believe this is the spacer, and those are probably the two bearings. And there is my last C-clip for this little portion of it, and this little washer. So I will pause it and do that real quick. And you definitely need to be careful when you're installing that little C-clip, that last one. I use this little pair of angled needle nose pliers. Like I said, you want to be careful that you don't snag any of the gears on the way down and scratch up any of the gears. Just something to be mindful of. Alright, so I put this little spacer on in between, which is right here, and then this bearing. I made sure to put some of that black grease there, that moly grease, on the shaft, move the spacer up and down on it a couple times, made sure it had some lubrication on it, as well as putting a little bit more of that grease in between the bearing and that spacer. And then at the end here, you're supposed to put this little washer on top of this C-clip and then slide the other bearing in. I did the same thing. I put a little bit of that moly grease in between the C-clip and this washer, and then I'm going to lay down a little bit more on top of that washer right before I install the other bearing. And now the manual doesn't necessarily tell you to do that as far as putting the grease in there in between all those little points. These two gears that are sitting on the shaft, those aren't spinning. Those aren't going to be moving anywhere. But you know, obviously the bearing's spinning, but it's not spinning on the shaft. It's spinning within itself. But I'd imagine that little spacer there, that's probably going to do some spinning. And that, you know, the washers that are in between the spacers and the C-clip and all that stuff, I'd imagine that those are going to be doing some spinning. So I just, like I said, preemptively threw some grease on it. It definitely can't hurt. Alrighty, so we are back again. I've got the little shift fork installed onto the shaft with these two C-clips on here. And these little guys are micro. Real small C-clips. Don't know if I can get the camera to focus on that guy.